Congressman Jeffries, you are now live on Facebook.
Good morning. I'm Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. It's my honor to represent the people of the 8th Congressional District in Brooklyn and Queens, and to be joined by my good friend, Councilman Mark Traeger, the chair of the City Council Education Committee. We are here to talk to you about some of the benefits of the American Rescue Plan. It's great to be home in Brooklyn. I'm here at the Shirley Chisholm State Office building and look forward to continuing to serve you in any way, shape, or form in meeting the needs of those who I am privileged to represent. The COVID-19 pandemic is a once-in-a-century crisis that required a once-in-a-century comprehensive, compassionate, and continuing congressional response. That is what the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan represents. We acted decisively to meet the moment because COVID-19 has brought so much pain and suffering and death to the people of New York City and those throughout the nation. The American Rescue Plan is designed to crush the virus, provide direct assistance to everyday New Yorkers who are struggling, make sure that we can get our schools and businesses reopened for in-person learning and commerce in every single neighborhood throughout our community, and ultimately to lay the foundation to revive our economy and create prosperity and opportunity in every single zip code. It's unfortunate that we were required to pass the American Rescue Plan without a single Republican vote, because the COVID-19 pandemic is not a Democratic crisis or a Republican crisis. It is an American crisis. But thanks to great leadership from President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, we were able to get it done. The American Rescue Plan will provide substantial assistance to state and local governments, including over $12 billion directly to New York State in order to help ensure that dramatic budget cuts are not necessary, and an additional $6+ billion to New York City to ensure that the New York City budget is stabilized, because we don't want the communities that have been hurt the most by the COVID-19 pandemic to suffer disproportionate and adverse consequences from dramatic budget cuts. Our state and local budgets are necessary when it comes to public safety, public health, public education, public transportation, public housing, and the general provision of the public good. And as a result of the American Rescue Plan, we have provided the assistance that New York City and New York State need in order for a fair, compassionate, and transformational budget to be put into place. The American Rescue Plan is also designed to provide shots in the arms of every single New Yorker and American who wishes to be vaccinated. The COVID-19 pandemic is not over for any of us until it's over for all of us. And the way in which we can crush this virus once and for all is to ensure that everyone is vaccinated. As a result of the American Rescue Plan, this week, every single New Yorker who is 16 years or older is eligible to schedule a vaccination appointment. And so I encourage all of you to make sure that you do so, either at a pharmacy or a health clinic or at a local hospital or at a church or house of worship that have also served as pop-up vaccination sites. Here in Brooklyn, we have a mega site at Medgar Evers College that can also be utilized. President Biden initially promised that during his first 100 days in office, there would be at least 100 vaccination shots. As a result of the American Rescue Plan, during President Biden's first 100 days in office, there will be at least 200 million vaccination doses administered, and we hope to have every single American who wishes to be vaccinated able to receive a vaccine by July 4th, Independence Day, where we hope to see a greater return to normalcy. Of course, the American Rescue Plan is designed to provide direct assistance to everyday New Yorkers who are struggling. The American Rescue Plan provides an additional $1,400 in direct payment survival checks to most New Yorkers. Those who as individuals make $75,000 or less, or as a married couple make $150,000 or less. Many of you have already received your $1,400 survival check. If you have not, please contact either my office or the office of Councilman Mark Traeger so we can assist you in receiving the relief that we know you need to help your family make it through this storm. A family of 4 is eligible to receive $5,600 in direct payment survival assistance because of the American Rescue Plan. There are so many other aspects of this transformational piece of legislation designed to meet the moment. But let me just talk briefly about 2 before turning it over to the distinguished chair of the City Council Education Committee. The American Rescue Plan also extends the emergency unemployment insurance benefit of an additional $300 per week that was scheduled to expire in March and will now remain available through the end of August. We recognize that hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers remain unemployed. And as we work to revive our economy, we still want to make sure that we provide that social safety net to get through these challenging times. Lastly, the American Rescue Plan includes an enhanced child tax credit that will cut child poverty in New York City and throughout the nation in half by ensuring that beginning in July, families with children will receive, if your child is 6 or under, $300 per month. And for those children between 6 and 17, approximately $250 per month. An additional assistance to help with your expenses in an increasingly challenging environment where the high cost of living here in New York City is one of the most expensive in the world. The American Rescue Plan meets the moment, is transformational, and achieves the goal of ensuring that as a society, we can build back better, lift everyone up, and create prosperity and opportunity in every single zip code. It's now my honor to yield to my good friend, the highly distinguished chair of the City Council Education Committee, a phenomenal leader, phenomenal educator, phenomenal public servant, to talk about the aspect of the American Rescue Plan from New York City's perspective that is designed to ensure that we can get our children back in the classroom in a safe environment where they can receive a top flight education from our wonderful teachers. I now yield to my good friend, Chairman Mark Traeger.
Thank you so much to Congressman Jeffries, his office, his team, that has been incredibly responsive to the needs of our district, even while championing issues in Washington, helping us set up testing sites and vaccine sites and food distributions. His accessibility and visibility has made a profound difference in our district every day. So we appreciate you, Congressman, so much. And I also want to note for the record, as we thank the Congress and the President and the Vice President for the American Rescue Plan, this was a plan that was years in the making. Certainly, we recognize the significant change in leadership in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm very grateful to President Biden and Vice President Harris. But I remember very clearly that our Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, who does a great job here in the district, was also traveling across the state, traveling across the country to help support candidates to secure a new House majority. Because if not for having a new House majority, we would not have this type of record of support that we're seeing for our public schools, for hospitals, for working families, for small businesses, for immigrants across our country. So this is a plan that was years in the making. We appreciate you so much, Congressman Jeffries. I want to speak about the impact on New York City. I turn back to March of last year, when the nation's largest school system, a school system of 1.1 million students, had to shift from in-person to remote in a matter of 3 or 4 days. And I want to recognize the extraordinary educators and school communities that have moved heaven and earth to make this system work with limited support. Last year, we had to order over 300,000 iPads, many of which did not arrive until months later. We had close to 80 DOE employees lose their lives due to the pandemic as of June of last year, impacting many of our school communities. My committee had to subpoena our local education department to get attendance data from last spring, which proved really hurtful and impactful results. Schools and communities of color were 8 times more likely to have kids disconnected, not connecting to remote learning because of the lack of access to reliable internet or having Chromebooks or having iPads. We still to this day have kids in shelter who still do not have access to reliable internet. The impacts on their social, academics could not have been more clear. We have many high school students now who have taken on additional responsibilities to help support their parents pay rent because mom or dad might have lost their job. And I'm a former high school history teacher, so I still stay in touch with many of our high school educators and our school leaders. And I also want to recognize, Congressman, that our extraordinary principals and assistant principals, it's easy for City Hall to tweet out changes, but who has to operationalize every single change? And those are our extraordinary school leaders. I want to thank them. I also want to recognize our extraordinary school food workers, our cafeteria workers, our school cleaners, our school safety officers who have kept buildings open to help feed families during the pandemic throughout this entire time. So we recognize that. But to get back to the impact and what the American Rescue Plan does to address it. During the budget I had last year in the city, which was the most painful budget ever because of the lack of support that we had from the previous president, we had to answer a question. Will the impact and the trauma that our kids are experiencing, will it be temporary or will it be generational? We're talking about 7, 8 months of disrupted instruction for kids. And as a former teacher, I could tell you, if my students missed 2 or 3 days of instruction, that was a lot. But when you're talking about 7, 8, 9 months of instruction that is not fluid, that could have devastating impacts during the course of their academic lives. So, Congressman, thanks to the American Rescue Plan, and also as evidenced by last night, New York State has reached an agreement on a historic budget for education. We are able to do things that we have never been able to do before, and I'll give you some examples. Currently in New York City, over 600 schools. We have over 1,800 schools in New York City. Over 600 schools do not have a full-time social worker and counselor. As a former teacher, again, I'm going to tell you, you need to address the social emotional needs of our kids in order to make the academics work. You know, kids are not robots, they're human beings. And schools, in my view, are the great equalizer, that regardless of what's happening in their lives, every child should feel loved, safe, supported. But we lack full-time supports for our kids. Congressman, thanks to the American Rescue Plan, that is about to change. We are going to be proposing in our budget, which is due in June, that every single New York City school will have full-time social workers, will have full-time counselors. We can never have said that before. That was not even in the realm of possibility before. But that is what the American Rescue Plan is now allowing us to have a serious conversation about. I also want to note for the record that in New York City, we have over 200,000 kids with IEPs, special education children. During the course of the pandemic, during my hearing, we learned over 40,000 kids were not able to receive any other special education services. So one of the major priorities for us in the council is compensatory time, making sure that we account for the dramatic loss of instruction. These are kids that have regressed and have fallen behind, that were shortchanged by our system for many years. We have to prioritize these children as we move forward. The American Rescue Plan will allow us to invest in hiring more school psychologists and invest in hiring more supports for kids to make sure that we take stock of their needs and help them find baseline and help them move forward. This summer, I have a vision in the City Council that we need a universal summer program where every child in New York City from every zip code will be afforded an opportunity to enroll in free academic, social, recreational programming in their schools. I also believe that high school students who are of income age must be given stipends to participate in wonderful programming, to reconnect them back with their peers and back with their school communities. So I think summer is really important. I also want to say, Congressman, that in New York City, we have something called PSAL, our sports programming in our high schools. Over 20,000 kids, 85% of which Black and Latino, don't have access to an athletic sports team in their high school. In my school, we did have a sports team, and that made a difference because your coaches and all the parent volunteers, those were added mentors that kept kids in school, that helped mentor kids and helped guide them along the way. And that created bonds and relationships. In this budget, thanks to the American Rescue Plan, every single child from every single zip code will have the ability to participate in their own sports team in their local school. And we're also going to prioritize that all of our schools will receive 100% of their Fair Student funding, which is the city tax levy funding stream that for years has been unable to meet the needs of our school communities. But thanks to the American Rescue Plan, thanks to Albany Speaker Carl Heastie, Senate Leader Andre Stewart Cousins, using federal resources, getting the money into our schools so our principals could hire more teachers, can hire more support staff. And Congressman, I also want to say for the record, as we're talking about what more we can do, I also want to be very, very blunt about this. The American Rescue Plan is also helping save jobs. If you're a New York City teacher, and I consider you family, many of you were on the chopping block because of the lack of support last year. If you're a paraprofessional, guidance counselor, social worker, school food worker, school cleaner, the American Rescue Plan has now helped us save these critical positions when over 20,000 city positions were on the verge of being lost because of the lack of support last year. So Congressman, on behalf of my school family, on behalf of all of my colleagues, thank you for not just saving these positions, but giving us for the first time in a long time ever, the ability to add historic level support for our kids, for the children who need the help the most. So I'm gonna pause here because I can go on about what you're allowing us to do that we couldn't do before, but thank you for delivering a grand slam home run for New York City students.
Well, thank you, Councilman Traeger, because that was an incredible articulation of some of the things that under your leadership and your colleagues in the City Council in partnership with the mayoral administration will be able to do on behalf of our children, more than 1 million in the New York City public school system. The American Rescue Plan will transform public education in the city of New York. It will ensure that we can begin to allow every single child to robustly achieve the American dream and realize their God-given potential. That is why Councilman Traeger and myself and others serve in government, to try to make a difference for the least, the lost, and the left behind. And I have the opportunity to work on the American Rescue Plan is one of the great privileges of my public service journey. Councilman Traeger mentioned something that is also important. Leadership matters, voting matters, elections have consequences. The American Rescue Plan is the law of the land because Democrats are now in the majority in the House and the Senate and have a partner in President Biden at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. We delivered and we'll continue to do so to make sure that we can achieve the promise of building back better for the people. As we wind down, Councilman Traeger, I wanted to get your thoughts on some of the things that we should be thinking about as we move forward with respect to the American Jobs Act, which is the legislation that we are now considering in terms of a transformational investment in transportation and infrastructure, including bridges, roads, tunnels, airports, our mass transit system, and of course, our public housing, which is in desperate need of upgrade and modernization. In the Coney Island community that we share as representatives, we have one of the largest concentrations of public housing in amusement district and are limited in the transportation options that the people of the Coney Island Peninsula have available to them at this time. Thanks to your leadership, the ferry will come online, I believe, in the next few months. But what are some of the other things that we should be thinking about in Washington as we pursue President Biden's Build Back Better agenda?
Thank you, Congressman, for that important question. And I also just want to note for the record that the Congressman, was able to get us historic levels of FEMA and Hurricane Sandy recovery aid as we speak. I'm proud to report that Coney Island Hospital, which you helped secure over $923 million after Superstorm Sandy, is almost finished with building a brand new resilient tower, elevating their critical infrastructure. And Coney Island Hospital has been the critical part of our social safety net, helping so many of our folks get tested and now get vaccines. They've vaccinated over 7,000 residents and counting, helping many of our seniors. So Congressman, if not for your federal support a couple of years ago, they would not be in a position to help people during a pandemic. So I just want to note that for the record. Obviously, Congressman, I'm still going to talk about school infrastructure. I'm still going to talk about the fact that many of our school buildings in New York City were built with money from the New Deal and haven't seen new electrical wire upgrades or ventilation systems since the New Deal. So we're definitely going to need more support to have 21st century ventilation systems in New York City schools. Also making sure, Congressman, that as we're talking about green infrastructure, and you've been a real leader with us in the Coney Island community, getting us federal money to help our schools rebuild and recover from Superstorm Sandy, about who will be the workforce preparing the future electric batteries and the solar panels, making sure that we retrofit schools to build capacity in our local communities for students to be a part of the building and maintaining of this. I think there's an opportunity there. With regards to public housing, we have over a $40 billion plus and growing capital need in public housing due to just years and years of neglect from really all levels. But again, thanks to the new House majority, there's a real opportunity now to really make a difference. And so I would argue that we need to make sure that we continue to fortify our public hospital systems. You have already kind of had a head start in Coney Island Hospital, but we know that many more hospitals need upgrades to make sure that we are meeting the challenges of the 21st century, making sure that we retrofit our schools so we give our kids 21st century internet capacity. The digital divide is real. Many of our schools just do not have enough bandwidth support to provide internet for all the teachers and for all the kids. So infrastructure is more than roads and bridges, even though those are critical parts of infrastructure, but social infrastructure is very important. Our schools, our hospitals, our public housing, and making sure that our local governments spend it the right way, efficiently as well. But that's our job here locally. But you have already laid the groundwork for record levels of support with Hurricane Sandy aid, and we are excited about what's to come. So again, thank you for already having a record on this, and we look forward to more support, Congressman.
Well, thank you, Councilman Traeger. We certainly are going to do all that is necessary in order to lift up every single community that I'm privileged to represent. Help is not just on the way. Help is here because of the American Rescue Plan, which will lay the foundation to supercharge our economy, crush this virus, get us past this pandemic, and create an opportunity where every single community can thrive. So thank you again, Councilman Traeger, for your great leadership. Thank you, all of those who have tuned in, who we are both privileged to represent throughout the neighborhoods that we serve. God bless each and every one of you. God bless the 8th Congressional District, and God bless the United States of America.